Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into what is arguably the single greatest mystery of human existence. What exactly happens to our consciousness at the very threshold of death? Now, you might be thinking this is purely philosophical territory, but we are actually going to impartially bridge hard, empirical, clinical data from the final moments of biological life with emerging, mathematically grounded quantum field theories. Our goal here is to map out precisely how the physical body shuts down and how what some cutting-edge scientists are calling the quantum soul might actually persist beyond that biological collapse.
So let's start with the big question. What actually happens to our minds when the brain is completely deprived of oxygen? For decades, conventional medical science just assumed it was a simple fade to black. Unplug the machine and the screen goes dark. But recent continuous EEG recordings of dying patients have revealed something entirely different. And honestly, it's absolutely mind-blowing. Instead of a quiet shutdown, they show a profound, paradoxical surge of neurological activity. The data tells us this isn't just random misfiring. It's a dynamic, highly structured event that demands a serious scientific explanation.
To unpack all of this, our explainer is going to follow a macro to micro funnel. First, we'll look at the final biological minute. Second, gamma surges and dying brains. Third, the quantum mechanics of consciousness. Fourth, disembodiment and non-local identity. Fifth, the quantum soul hypothesis. And finally, reassessing death and reality.
Section 1. The final biological minute. Mapping the unknown.
Okay, so the moment the heart stops beating, we enter what researchers call the biological limbo. Let's walk through this timeline because it's incredibly precise. At 0 seconds, arterial blood pressure drops to absolutely zero. The pump stops. Fast forward just 10 seconds, and we hit what's known as the identity horizon. This is where a cortical shutdown begins. But then, right around the 30-second mark, we see this paradoxical gamma surge of intense brain activity. Finally, by 60 seconds, the brain hits terminal spreading depolarization. Think of that as a massive final wave of cellular power failure rolling across the brain tissue. This 60-second window is absolutely crucial because it proves that death is not an instantaneous switch. It is a highly structured, multiphasic sequence of neural decay. To put that into perspective, imagine your brain is a smartphone running on exactly 1% battery. As its oxygen and glucose reserves rapidly deplete, it doesn't just crash all at once. It enters a top-down, hierarchical shutdown. It starts forcibly quitting the most energy-intensive, advanced apps first, like the cerebral cortex. Yet remarkably, in those first 10 seconds, the brain fights tooth and nail to utilize its remaining metabolic reserve to maintain your cohesive self-concept. It's actively trying to navigate the physiological crisis. Clinically, this sometimes results in a profound, peaceful witnessing state for the patient right before irreversible cellular damage sets in. It's hanging on to you for as long as biologically possible.
Moving on to Section 2, Gamma Surges and Dying Brains, the Paradox of the Terminal Minute.
So let's look closer at that gamma surge we just mentioned. Researchers from the University of Michigan, alongside data from the massive AWARE-2 study, discovered a true paradox when monitoring comatose, dying patients. The measurements show an unbelievable 20-fold increase in serotonin levels during this terminal minute, 20 times the normal baseline. This massive chemical release fuels a hyper-vivid retrieval of your autobiographical memories. It is literally the biological mechanism behind your life flashing before your eyes. The brain is furiously scanning your entire past to find some kind of coping strategy for the impending system collapse, and in doing so, it creates a highly lucid internal reality, even as the physical outside world completely fades away.
And we have to pay very close attention to exactly where this electrical storm is concentrated. It's in the temporal parieto-occipital, or TPO junction. This is a highly specialized multimodal brain area that acts as the brain integrator of our visual, auditory, and somatosensory information. Basically, it's the part of the brain that grounds you in your physical body. Now, its hyperactivation during the gamma surge is heavily implicated in clinical reports of out-of-body experiences. From a strictly biological perspective, this surge gives us a neat mechanical explanation for disembodiment. It suggests that as the TPO junction misfires under extreme stress, a dying patient might experience a profound hallucination of being separated from their body, perhaps even observing their own resuscitation from the ceiling.
Section 3. Quantum Mechanics of Consciousness, the Macro to Micro Funnel.
But here is where things take a massive turn. To truly explain the sheer, highly organized coherence of these terminal brainwaves in metabolically dying tissue, the biology alone kind of falls short. We have to transition from classical biology to quantum physics. Take a look at Ernest Rossi's conceptual framework here. He proposes that living systems fundamentally function as a quantum heat engine. In this model, consciousness isn't just a byproduct of chemical soup, it's governed by quantum field dynamics all the way down to the atomic level. We're talking about the very weak forces holding our DNA together. Rossi's work suggests that macroscopic biological order actually emerges directly from microscopic quantum mechanics.
This table right here perfectly highlights the clash between these two paradigms. The standard biological view treats the terminal surge as just a neurochemical cascade, essentially a dying brain hallucinating within its strict physical network before terminal depolarization wipes the hard drive. But the quantum view, which builds on theories like those from Penrose and Hameroff, suggests something wildly different. It treats consciousness as a fundamental information state. Under the quantum framework, the locus of consciousness isn't just brain meat. It's space-time geometry and quantum vibrational fields. So in this view, the terminal surge isn't a hallucination at all. It is literally information attempting to preserve itself as the biological hardware completely fails.
Section 4. Disembodiment and non-local identity, beyond the physical host.
Now remember how the biological model explained out-of-body experiences earlier? It said the TPO junction misfires, causing a hallucination. Well, the quantum model takes a totally different stance on disembodiment. Here, disembodiment is defined as an actual, non-local quantum state. It's hypothesized to be achieved through quantum entanglement and holographic information storage directly in the vacuum of space. By treating disembodiment not as a spiritual, magical event, but as a hard physics problem, researchers can impartially evaluate how a conscious essence, your organized architecture of memories and personality, could theoretically exist and process information entirely without a physical, biological host.
To explain how that could even be possible, researchers propose an incredibly detailed mechanism known as the cell-soul pathway. Let's break down these steps. First, your normal bodily consciousness desperately focuses inward on surviving the cardiac arrest, trying to kickstart cellular recovery. But step 2 is where the magic happens. Low-energy photons within the brain's microtubular network become quantumly entangled. Step 3, this entanglement allows your functional consciousness to literally form a photon cloud outside the boundaries of the physical body. This cloud acts as a sort of holographic processor. And finally, step 4, your subjective experience of the room, what you are seeing and feeling, is literally teleported and retained non-locally. It's an information transfer from the cellular level to the quantum field.
Section 5. The Quantum Soul Hypothesis, the Apeiron Identity.
Building on this framework brings us to something known as the Apeiron Identity Hypothesis. What if consciousness is just a fundamental, indestructible property of the universe, exactly like gravity or electromagnetism? Under this theory, physicists suggest the existence of an Apeiron field. Think of it as a primordial, baseline information substrate underlying all of reality. Your consciousness is an operator that interacts with these fields. So in this context, the soul is simply defined as the specific, unique content of information preserved within this universal field. And here's the real kicker. Because of a concept called temporal non-locality, your identity might not just be physically distributed, it could actually be chronologically smeared across time itself.
Now, I know the clinical implications of this sound like absolute science fiction, but the theoretical literature points to some truly astounding developments. We're talking about experimental, FDA-certified soul echo kits. These are highly specialized tools designed to, theoretically, interact with that residual, non-local consciousness within a very specific 37-day post-mortem window. When used in controlled clinical trials for advanced grief counseling, establishing this data-driven post-mortem communication has shown a staggering 68% efficacy in reducing symptoms of complicated grief. It is a completely wild merging of high-level quantum physics and psychological therapy.
And it goes even further than therapy. This framework is actually giving rise to a brand new field called forensic thanatology. Investigators are utilizing something called Apeiron field spectroscopy to isolate residual neural echoes. They use advanced algorithms, specifically Wiener-Kinchen filters, which are fantastic at pulling a pure signal out of messy background noise. Astoundingly, this technique reports a 92% accuracy rate in successfully recovering structural information that is akin to victim testimony, leaving only about 8% as unreadable neural noise. It strongly suggests that our informational footprint persists in the environment long enough to be scientifically queried after biological death.
Section 6. Reassessing Death and Reality, the Constrained Disorder Principle.
So how does this pristine mathematical quantum information actually interact with our messy, wet biology in the first place? It's explained through the constrained disorder principle.
This principle posits that inherent variability and noise are actually mandatory for biological systems to function. Think of it like jazz music. It needs a little bit of structural chaos and improvisation to really find its groove. Living cells use the seemingly random, unpredictable nature of quantum effects to adapt, survive, and transfer energy. This tailored randomness is exactly what allows a probabilistic quantum soul to actively couple with a physical, deterministic brain. So, if we look at the big picture comparison here, classical physics is fantastic for mapping the deterministic chemical reactions and the structural decay of the brain when the oxygen stops flowing. We need it to understand the mechanics of the 60-second biological limbo. But to truly understand the vast, synchronistic brainwaves that encode our very existence and memories, the quantum theory of consciousness is required. It forces a massive paradigm shift. We have to view the human brain not just as a wet machine that generates thought from scratch, but as an incredibly highly tuned receiver, pulling and processing information from a universal vibrational field.
This brings us to a really profound reframing of our entire existence, captured perfectly by physicist Fred Alan Wolf. He stated, "Death is merely a shifting of a person's consciousness from one dimension of the hologram to another." I really want you to let that sink in for a second. From a quantum perspective, the terminal phase of biological life isn't the destruction of identity. It's simply a translation of your fundamental data from the physical hardware into an indestructible, non-local, zero-point field.
Now, why does this matter for us today? Because this isn't just late-night dorm room philosophy. This fundamentally changes the future of medicine. Recognizing that 60-second biological limbo and the potential for non-local consciousness forces us to radically update our medical ethics. It demands a serious reevaluation of exactly when hospital protocols allow for organ procurement. It inspires completely new neuroprotection protocols during CPR to protect that functional consciousness. It introduces chronotherapeutic modulation, meaning therapies that are perfectly timed to the body's internal clocks to stabilize cells and ease terminal distress. Ultimately, it bridges the historical gap between the chaotic emergency room and the ancient philosophy of mind.
As we continue to decode the quantum signatures of the dying brain, we are left to rethink the very foundation of reality. If our identity is fundamentally smeared across time, operating on quantum fields that don't care about biological decay, is death truly a conclusion, or is it simply a translation? The data points us to a universe much stranger and much more interconnected than we ever thought possible. It leaves us wondering what other profound secrets our fundamental physical reality holds about the journey of the human soul. Thank you for joining us for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the nature of reality.